Hey guys, welcome back. It's wonderful to see your smiling faces. Today we're going to start a book series using this book, One Zentangle A Day. I've got a lot of videos about Zentangles. If you're not sure what they are, you can go check those out. I'll leave links down in the description below. Here's an example of a Zentangle tile. Notice that it's just made out of patterns. And the purpose of a Zentangle, Zen meaning, relaxation, meditation, and tangle meaning little patterns. The purpose is to use these patterns to just meditate, focus, relax. The supplies I'll be using for this, I've got an assortment of different sizes of micron pens. That's an 005, 02, 05, and 08. Now, if you don't want to use these, you can absolutely use Sharpies or the ultra fine point Sharpies. As a matter of fact, I'll show you the difference here. This was made with micron pens, and the one on the left was made with Sharpies, the ultra fine Sharpies. So you can definitely do it with just regular old materials. You can even use a ballpoint pen if you want. I've got little cut squares of paper. Any paper will do. Cardstock is probably better, but I've just cut some squares down to about 3-inch squares. And I'll just be using some regular number 2 pencils. I highly doubt that I will need this. As a matter of fact, I'm just going to toss that to the side. These pencils have more than enough eraser. I won't be doing a lot with the pencil, and I definitely won't be doing much with the eraser, if anything. So super simple supplies, and we're going to follow along this book. And this book goes for 42 days. I don't know if I'll make 42 videos in this series, but maybe I will. We'll see. I'm at least gonna go through the first week or two of this book, just because there are a lot of lessons that can be learned in here about not just how to make a Zentangle, but also things like overlapping and shading and just general tools that are good to have in your tool belt as an artist. Instead of reading the book, I'm just going to dive into the things that it teaches. I'm not going to read you the book on camera here. There's a couple of projects, a couple of lessons each day. So on day 1 here, the first thing it talks about is creating a lettermark or a mark for your name. So instead of what I normally do when I sign my artwork is I sign Mr. New. The idea here is to just practice making some kind of a mark that uses your initials put together in some interesting way. So here, like, somebody's initials are BK, and you notice that they'll like stack the letters on top of each other, or maybe try the B backwards, and lots of different ways. So I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on this card, just sort of playing around with my initials. My initials are NCN, or if I just did my first and last, it would be, of course, NN. And so I'm going to play around with different ways of writing my initials to make some kind of an interesting mark. So, for example, I could overlap them. NN. Maybe I could wrap the C around the corner of the N and do the next N there. I kind of like that. What if I just do NN overlapped like that? It almost looks like a diamond in the middle. And I'm just going to play around. See, maybe I could do a backwards N and a forwards N together. Nah, it looks too much like a W. I'm just going to play around a little bit and see what I come up with. And I really like the way this is turning out, where I do the C really big around it. So the way I made that was an N, and then I overlapped another N offset to the side a little bit, and then wrap a C around it. And I think it looks better when I just do it instead of trying to tell you what I'm doing, so I'm going to do it again. Yeah. And it doesn't necessarily look like my initials, but let me just do it again here, a little bigger, something like that. And so I could use that as a letter mark instead of signing my name when I make art. And now this is just a cool, fun little thing. Does that mean I have to do this instead of signing my name? No, if I want to sign my name, I can sign my name. But this is just a quick little fun exercise to just kind of get your hand moving and get used to the idea that you're going to be doing the same thing over and over again. You're going to be making a lot of patterns, which means repeating the same thing. And also, it does give a fun little alternative to, instead of using an actual signature, you just make a little letter mark. Moving along, the next little exercise that this day one gives us is 3 different patterns. They've got names to them and shows you how to make them. If you've never made a Zentangle before, I would suggest practicing the patterns first by themselves before you try to put them together to make a Zentangle tile. So here I've gone ahead and made myself a practice sheet where I'm going to do static, tipple, and crescent moon. Notice that I have labeled them and made little boxes that I'm going to put them in. Also notice this line right here, and then this line across here, and then this loop around here. Those are what we call a string in Zentangle. And the concept of a string is just to say, this is one box, let's split it into more than one box by drawing a line. And that line should not be straight. Think of it like you're dropping a string on your paper. So if you drop a string on your paper, it might make a loop or something like that. So now instead of just one box, I have a box with 2 separate shapes inside of it. 2 separate shapes. And you can make different patterns in each shape. So here's a Zentangle tile, and you can see that there's a string that wraps around this away with one pattern inside of it and another pattern on the other side of it. Anyway, when you're following along with these patterns, anything that's done in red line should be done with a pen. And then maybe there are some little bits of shading, like you can see in this pattern here. There's shading in alternating stripes. So static is probably one of the simplest patterns you'll ever make. Just make a zigzag line. Zigzag, 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 zigzag. You can make them small zigzags or bigger zigzags. It really doesn't matter. And then all you do is you just follow the zigs and zags over and over. Zigzag, zigzag. Notice that I'm trying to keep them identical or parallel to each other. And then when you're done filling that area, the last step, you can see some shading here. What we're going to do is we're going to draw a line with our pencil that goes through all of the downward strokes on the zigzag. And then again a line through all the downward strokes here. And again a line through the downward strokes here. And here. And then from that, we're going to shade darkest right at the line and then move our way to the left and make a gradient to lighter shading. So again, darkest right at the line, and then as we move to the left, our shading gets lighter and lighter until it's very light at the top peak where the zigzags point up. All right, and that just gives it a little bit of three-dimensionality, a little bit of depth. Okay, the next pattern, tipple, is nothing but circles. Notice that we start with circles that wrap around the edges. And it's okay if these are not all the same size. As a matter of fact, it's probably best if they are not all the same size. If you're in a math class and you're making patterns, you really want to make everything exactly the same. But in art, really, it's the differences that make our patterns really fun and unique. Alright, so the next thing is to fill this space with more circles. And don't concern yourself too much about filling all the tiny gaps, because we're going to come back in the next step and fill all the teeny tiny little gaps with even tinier circles. I might switch to a smaller pen. I've been using this 08. this might be a great time for me to switch to either the 02 or the 005. Get really tiny lines. And try not to overthink it. Remember, the whole purpose of this is to find your zen. When you're practicing, you might need to think a little bit more about what you're doing, but the idea is once you've practiced it a bunch, you can do it without thinking. That's what Zen is all about. It's about meditating. Now, with Crescent Moon, this is another really simple pattern. We just start with some little half circles around the edges of our shape, and then we make what's called an aura around each one of those. So you're making stripes that wrap around. So let's start by spreading these out. By the way, I've switched to an 02. It's sort of a medium size, but it doesn't really matter. You can use any size you want. I ought to use a bigger one if I'm filling these in dark, but anyway. So I make a half circle, and I fill it in dark, and then I leave a gap, leave a space, make another half circle. And while I do this, I do want to mention that it is totally possible for you to come up with your own pattern ideas. There are a bunch of specific Zentangle copyrighted, I guess, trademarked patterns, but really you can make up your own patterns and be fun, free, and bold with it. I have a lot of videos, I'll leave a link in the description, about how to make different kinds of patterns or how to make up your own patterns. So if you're interested in that, you can look that up. But as I'm following along this book, it is going to teach some very specific patterns that are in the Zentangle lingo, so you can talk to people and say, oh yeah, I made the Crescent Moon pattern, or, you know, whatever. Anyway, so once we've made those half circles, the next is to just make, it's like you're making a circle around the circle, right? Except it's only a half circle around a half circle. And then you do it again. And in a place like this, like I could carry this all the way to the edge where those two are going to meet. But in a place like this, where it's like it'd be tight space to go through there. So instead, what I'm going to do is just keep going and wrap around in like a spiral fashion, and maybe a little gap there. And so that was step 3. Now step 4 is to add some shading, and you can decide which layers to shade or which layers to leave blank. What I'm going to do is start by shading the layer around each half circle, so it's black and then gray and then white. And I don't necessarily have to shade the whole thing, just whatever I feel like. There. Alright, so those are the 3 tangles for the day, the ones to practice, and the idea here next is to actually use those tangles, the patterns, to make a Zentangle tile. Alright, so starting our 11-step Zentangle process, step number 1 is to relax. So take a deep breath. Are you relaxed yet? I hope so. Breathe. Oh wait, we just did that. You kind of have to do that, right? Like, I mean, well, whatever. You get the idea. Breathe, take a breath, relax. I think those could be combined into one step, but whatever. Next, admire the paper and the tools. Ooh, ah, wow. Okay, yeah. Appreciate this opportunity. Oh, wow. I have this wonderful opportunity to sit in my garage with the big garage door open, listening to the rain and the birds and cars driving past and the rain and the birds, and draw. It's a good, it's a good opportunity to draw. Yeah, I like this. Draw the border. Oh, this is where we're actually starting our drawing. I'm gonna, write in my book, this is step number 1. This is the first part of actually making a Zentangle. Draw the border. So to draw the border, I'm going to make a dot in each corner, and I'm going to connect the dots, but not with straight lines. I'm going to be organic and flowy with it. There, I've made a border. Step number 2, draw the string. Okay, so here it's 2, 3 different strings. You can do them separately, or you can kind of just, you know, make one loopy line. And notice that here it made 1, 2, 3, 4 different shapes, and here it made 1, 2, 3, 4 different shapes. 3 or 4 or 5, I mean, you don't want like your string to just be so convoluted that you got tiny little spaces. You want to be able to actually draw patterns inside of there. Now, I've got 4 different spaces, but only 3 different patterns that we've learned, so I can either reuse a pattern twice or make up my own pattern. What they've done here is they've made it look like this overlaps by having this pattern wrap around, but this is the same as this. And anyway, I'll figure it out. I might do the 2 corners the same, just for whatever. What's the next step? With the pen. With the pen. Okay, I'm going to switch to my pen. Whoop, pen. Draw the tangles. Okay. Now this step, step number 3, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, depending on how you... Anyway, this is the step where you really feel the Zentangle process, because as I'm drawing these patterns into these spaces, I mean, what is Zen? What is meditation? It's when you focus on one thing so much that you just ignore the rest of the world around you. So, I'm going to do this in time-lapse. I'm going to, you know, put some music behind it, but if you're following along, you should just pause the video, take your time to just relax and draw some patterns and enjoy life for a little bit. So, anyway, here I go. And there you have it. I have finished... Oh, well, I guess I should do some shading. But as I finish shading this up, I just wanted to mention that in the description down below, I have added some links to where you can buy any of the materials that I'm using, including the book, just in case you're interested. Now, like I said, you can use any supplies you want. You don't have to use a special pen for this. You don't have to use any kind of special paper. But just if you're interested in the materials that I'm using, there are links down in the description. And if you buy from those links, it does help out the channel. There we go. I'm going to stop there with my shading. And you know what? I kind of did step number, whatever this is, I kind of did that along with number 3, shading the tangles. And then the next step says, with a pen, initial the front. Oh, Right, right. My little doobly thingy, like my N and my N and my C, right? There's my initials. Sure, we'll call that step number 4, because I kind of combined that with step number 3. And then, oh, reflect and appreciate. Ooh, ah, wow, that's awesome. It is actually pretty neat. As a matter of fact, while I'm reflecting and appreciating, I want to just comment about the things we have learned by doing this. We've learned about patterns. We've learned about shading. We've learned how to make an interesting little letter mark for our initials. We've learned how to build a Zentangle tile. There's been a lot that we've done in this day 1 of our Zentangle process. So there's a lot there to appreciate, and a lot of those skills will be helpful no matter what you're trying to draw. I mean, whether you're trying to draw a Zentangle or something else. And then, last but not least, admire up close and at arm's length. So you've seen it at a fair distance from this camera. Now it's time to zoom in. Well, there you have it. That is day 1 of One Zentangle A Day. I don't know if I'll go through the whole book, but I am at least going to go through the first week or two, one video each day for the next week or two, just to cover all of the basics of Zentangles, and we'll learn quite a few different patterns and a little bit more about shading and overlapping and mixing and matching and balance and harmony and unity. And there's a lot to be learned that these skills transfer over to any kind of art you want to make. So if you're interested in that, hit the subscribe button, like the video, share it with your friends, and I'll see you on the next one.